the purse strap will not be stretching when we're done with it. Welcome back to my WIP Snow Ball. Today I'm really excited to show you how I'm going to take these pieces of a sweater that are not finished and turn them into a bag. These are the steps we're going to be doing. Super cute fabric, needles, thread, and scissors, crochet hooks, zipper. I keep wanting to call this bias tape, but I know it's not. Oddly enough, the purse strap is the part that requires the most explaining for this entire project. Before you start crocheting your purse strap, you're going to want to make a few decisions. The first one is the length, the second one is the width, and the third one is how do you want to crochet it? Do you want it to just be a few longer rows or a bunch of short rows? Some things to keep in mind when you're making these decisions is that the purse strap will not be stretching when we're done with it. I prefer a crossbody strap on my purse, so I measure accordingly. I also prefer it to be about 2 inches wide, so when I'm actually constructing the strap, I make it 4 inches wide. This part here is a little messy right now, but that's okay. This part here is just a very long tail from when I first started making the purse strap. This one is where one ball ended and another one started, so I'm going to weave the ends in on this part. And this third part here is, I haven't tied the end off yet. I'm going to be hand sewing this tape to the crochet. Quick side note, you're going to want to leave 3 or 4 inches, give or take, of this stuff hanging off of the end when you sew it, in such a way that it is on a very distinct half with a little bit of yarn on this side and enough on this side. The stitch I'm using is going to be invisible on the other side of this fabric. You see? And how I do that is by doing just splitting the yarn like this and then going through the tape. Remember this big loop here, we're going to use it to crochet the side of the strap. And I'm going to be using a slip stitch because I want it to lay flat. When you're done, you're going to have something that looks like this. You'll have the tape hanging out on both ends, and you'll have these long tails that'll come in handy later on. But for now, we're just going to place this to the side and focus on the lining. I'm going to be folding the fabric a little bit different than normal, with the good sides facing out. That's because I'm going to be French seaming this lining. You'll notice that it's the same direction for both inches and centimeters on this ruler. It seems like this is cut on the bias, so I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra material just in case. I squared it up as best I could on this side. Then I'm going to take this carpenter's square at the 19 inches mark, line it up as best I can with both the line here and the line at the bottom of the fabric. After that, I'm going to double check everything off camera and write directly on the fabric. This is more of a reminder for myself than for you guys, but see how close that corner came to the edge of the fabric? This is why I give myself the extra space when things are not already squared. The material is still pretty square from the lining I just cut out, and I figure I can make the pockets and just follow the shape and size of this fabric. This is the cutout pocket. I'm going to sew along 2.5 of the edges because this is a folded edge. I'm not going to re-sew that. Then I am going to turn it so that the right side is facing out. Oh yeah, and I added interfacing. First I pinned the pockets where I wanted them to be when the fabric was folded, so I knew where it was going to land, and I sewed the pockets on while the fabric was unfolded. I also added a couple of dividers in the pockets just by sewing a straight stitch down. The next step is to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance up the 2 sides of the fabric and leave this part open. Now that I have the 2 side seams sewn up, I'm just going to turn it inside out. I did a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but if you prefer a larger seam allowance, that's cool. Just make sure to factor that into your measurements. Now I'm going to iron this and do another 1/4 inch seam allowance along here. So I'm going to be doing the zipper a little bit differently than if I had done it first. Basically, I laid it out so that there is a little bit hanging over each side. I unzipped it most of the way, but I left the little stopper on there. And I pinned it so that when it zips up, it will be in the correct place. When I did the rolled hem at the top here, I left a little bit of a lip, and that is what I'm using to sew the zipper to, and that way it doesn't show on the inside. But even if you sew it in a way that it does show on the inside, it's more important to match the thread to the zipper. The reason I am sewing the zipper on after putting the lining together is because I wanted to French seam it. And when you're French seaming something, it doesn't work as easily with the hack that most people do of sewing the zipper on first and then sewing the bag together. I mean, maybe you could get it to work that way, but I haven't had much luck in that department. And I find that you could do this on a machine as well. You'd have to go pretty slowly with it, but it is possible. I just felt like hand sewing it, that's all. The first half is attached. I'm going to zip this up and start to attach the second half. This lump of fabric here, I'm not going to bother fighting with. I'm just going to fold this over and attach it to that lip I mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to just hand stitch this where I want it to be. And because it's zipped up, it will help it line up with everything else. Also, it's a good idea at this point to go ahead and sew the section here so that it stays closed, just so that you don't end up accidentally pulling your zipper farther than it should go. The number of rounds you do is up to you. I don't really count, I just go until I feel like it's super sturdy, and then I hide the knot on the back. And you want to do this on both sides. To assemble your purse, you're going to want to single crochet up the two sides and leave the top part open. To do this, you're going to want to make sure you choose an outside and an inside. If they both look identical, just pick one and go with it. So when I single crochet this together, it's going to have a very specific look. If you prefer the slip stitch look, I've done that before and it works very well as well. It just depends on the aesthetic you're going for. I'm using this as a project bag. It was one of the earlier projects for my Finish It February, and it's working out pretty good. I'm just doing a single crochet because I think it'll look better for this particular thing. So you can experiment if you want and decide what aesthetic works specifically for the rectangle you're working with. I've used both, depending on the occasion, and they both work out quite well. You just have to stay true to the aesthetic that you're working with. After single crocheting the sides, I'm going to turn the purse inside out. Now we're going to start to add the lining. Future me here, I'm going to be showing you this tutorial adding the purse strap first. You're going to notice in the footage that the lining is already on, and don't worry, I'll show you that as well. And it really doesn't matter which one you add on first. For some reason, I convinced myself that the lining would be easier to add on first, and it'll work, but it's easier if you add the purse straps on first. All that ramble being said, please enjoy the rest of the tutorial. This decorative tape seems to have a tendency to fray, so I folded the edge over and tacked it down a little bit. This is the end of the purse strap from earlier. Take the part that's hanging out the end and tuck it in so that it won't be seen. I'm just going to place that there for a second and show you that you want to line up the center of this with the seam that we made earlier. Flip this over, have these parts pinched together so that the center is still lined up. Then single crochet this together using the long tail that you left when you crocheted the beginning of the strap. I did not leave enough string. Look at that. Okay, that's all right. I have more string here. I thought I left a long enough tail, but here we are. This is the tail from that. I'm also going to tuck that to the side in the hopes that we can pull on the correct string here. I would recommend going a little bit slower and making sure you get everything right, because it's a lot better than having to rip things out and do it again. Make sure there's a decent sized tail here. Cut it off and tie it off here. Then we're going to weave in all of these lovely ends. Next, I'm sure you can guess, is to attach the other side of the purse strap in the same way. And this time I have a very long tail on the end, so I can just use the tail to crochet this together. Now we're going to add the lining. Make sure you choose the direction that you prefer the zipper to be in if there's a distinct front and back, because this is the time to do that. For my project, it looks the same on both sides, so I'm not too worried about that. Once you have the lining where you want it to be, you're going to want to sew one half of the lining down, and you're going to want to pin it if you need help with that, because it can be difficult to hold all the things in place. It's also a good idea to find the center and pin that where it should be. Now we're going to attach the zipper and the lining to the purse. I'm going to start by hiding the knot on the back of the lining. I'm going to trim the excess. Let's see if I can explain this properly. I'm going to be holding it so this edge here, I don't like it when it looks like that, so I'm going to be holding it underneath here. And I'm going to be holding it so that the outside of the zipper stays flat. And then we're going to sew it up the same way you would a teddy bear. I think it's called an invisible stitch, but I'm not 100% sure, so don't hold me to that. You're going to split the yarn on this side going through and try not to tangle things. And then on this side, you're going to go directly across and do a little running stitch. The beginning of this is going to be the hardest part. And then on this part, where the thread comes out, you're going to go directly across and split the yarn again in a stitch that doesn't go all the way through to the other side, hence splitting the yarn. And then where the thread comes out here, you're going to go directly across. Okay. You're going to go directly across and do a little running stitch, reasonably straight as you can. Try not to tangle things and go through. And I'll hold this closer. Hopefully it'll focus. When you do this stitch, it is what it's called. It's an invisible stitch. You won't be able to see it here, and you won't be able to see it here, and you won't even be able to see it here. The purse strap starts here, and I sewed right up to it. Now I'm going to take the zipper and attach it to this here. You see how this stuff here is now lined up with the purse strap? That's what we're aiming for. We're going to tuck this part in here, pull this part straight, and get them both to stay in place at the same time, which is no small feat. Then once we have it, I'm going to take a pin and pin it together. Then we're going to sew this strap to the zipper. She's a little rough, but she'll hold. Switching over to a white thread, we're going to continue on attaching this to the lining. And This French seam comes in really handy for this part of the process. I've made this purse multiple times, and it's always worked out really well for me. But I don't really have a name for what I'm doing here, like the type of tactic I'm using for this, because it's kind of my own little brainchild that I made up. But I haven't seen anything else like this on YouTube, that's for sure. So if you like this stuff really well, if you could do me a favor and just smash the like button and share it with somebody who you think might enjoy it, that'd be awesome. It doesn't matter how pretty the sewing is for this particular section, because I am attaching this to the French seamed area. It's not going to show in here, and it's not going to show out here. Now that I have everything attached to the purse strap, and this part here is sewn down on the French seam, I'm just going to line everything up and do that invisible stitch down the rest of this, and we're going to be done. This is actually really exciting for me. I have a clean slate. Well, clean-ish, because I probably have other projects that are hiding somewhere in my stuff, but that's okay. I'm happy with this, and I'm going to start planning out some new projects. Although I think I'm gonna have to go back to just doing my blanket for a while, because I am completely out of things. I think I'll start with this book. I already had it, so it's not a thing new, but it'll be perfect to start as a clean slate as well. It'll be good for doing all my rough work, and I think I'll do some videos just showing me setting it up and planning my next projects. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again.